Hi guys, welcome back to the Warrior Academy podcast. We're streaming this live to Dubai, the UK, and all over YouTube as well. My name is Sebastian Bates, and I'm joined here with Mary Williams today. Mary Williams is the mind architect, and she's here to help us with parenting teenagers, to help give us advice about parenting teenagers, especially during the lockdown. Marie's an executive coach, she's a therapist and a conflict mediator. She works with leaders and organizations and individuals and entrepreneurs. Welcome, Mary, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
To see you? Yeah, very, very well, very well. I feel busier now that the lockdown started than than before the lockdown, to be honest.
I totally agree.
So would you mind telling us a little bit about you, what you do, just in a bit more detail?
So I have 5 children myself. My oldest is due to be 30 in about 3-4 weeks' time. And my youngest is 14, sorry, forgetting all the ages. So I'm in their mid-20s. And so I've been through the teenage years at least 3 times. And I'm sort of stuck in the middle of it now because they're 14 and 16, the 2 that are left at home. And I work with professionals in the main who want to find that balance between, how do I manage my team and my professional life? How do I manage my partner, and how do I look after my kids and find that balance between being ambitious and being a good parent? So it's bringing all the threads together.
Amazing. So, yeah, fantastic. It is, and from our kind of conversations in the past, you've been an amazing insight as well for me from a lot of these different advice you've given and that sort of stuff. So, it's coming from a lot of experience, this, which is really great. So it's a real privilege to have you on. Right now, we are in a lockdown. One of my biggest concerns is the mental health of young people who are going through self-isolation, right? I mean, for parents, it's a pretty nerve-wracking time as it is, with changes in the economy and health and society, socially, all these different things. And on top of that, there's a looking after children aspect, which is huge, right? And the pressure on children is massive. The pressure on teenagers is even greater. One of the big challenges teenagers I know in Dubai in particular, the parents I've spoken to, a lot of them have got exams which are coming up, which have been cancelled, and all these different concerns and worries about the future. So there's a lot of worried teenagers and therefore a lot of worried parents out there. I'd love to get some insights from you, first of all, about what this lockdown or self-isolation may be doing to teenagers at the moment, and then maybe some useful tips on how we can help them through it.
Yeah, so I think obviously both my children had similar experiences. My 16-year-old's had all of her GCSEs cancelled, and been told originally you'll get your grades in July, then you'll get them in August. So they've lost a lot, and I think it's really interesting because originally they would have gone through the excitement of, great, I don't have to do exams, I can stop revising, and I don't have to do work. My daughter was full of glee the other day when she said, I no longer have to do any work, one subject. But then they realize what they've lost. So I think you get this kind of peak where they go, wow, this is brilliant, I can be at home, this is amazing. And then they realize what that actually means, which is I've lost my GCSEs, I've lost all of that thing I've been working for over the last year, I've lost access to my friends. And they realize that those little moments at lunchtime and break time where they chat to their friends are really crucially important. And they start to look at other things they've lost. So they've lost the excitement of, maybe holidays that they go on. My son, who actually really doesn't like school, he's a school tolerator, he's a 14-year-old, he's desperate to go back to school. So we've got this interesting kind of role reversal where he's now gone, oh, actually, I really like routine. So much as your teenagers will tell you they don't like routine, they really do. And that's a key issue for them, that they're just missing routine. And the other thing is that at this age, their friendships, and this is really hard as a parent to hear, but their friendships are actually more important than their relationships with their parents. This is an age where as a parent, you kind of become the rock that they're tethered to. You are not the most important thing in their life. So you are something they will return to, either for cooking, cleaning, feeding, but actually emotionally, if they need you, they kind of know you're there. But research actually shows if a peer dies, if a peer friend dies at this age, it actually hits them harder than it would hit them if a parent died. So when you look at it as that level of strength of relationship, and we've just pulled them all away from their friends, you can imagine how hard that is on their mental health, that they can no longer see the people that are actually the most important in their life. So as parents, we're going, well, okay, you know, but at least we're here in the home and we're here with our family. But for them, they're saying, well, I'm kind of not my family, because my family right now is my friendship group.
Yeah,
so,
wow. It's an interesting insight, isn't it?
An awful lot. I think a lot of parents who are not seeing that, they're not engaging with that. And it's a hard thing, isn't it, as a parent to go, I am not as important right now as friends. You would rather be quarantined with your friends. Really.
Yeah. When you've always been the most important one, right?
Exactly. And this is the age where, you know, they're meant to be separating. They're not, if you've got a good, healthy relationship, it should be that you can talk very healthily with your children, but actually they shouldn't need you. Not right now. So we've kind of pushed them almost back into a more childhood orientated stage of kind of, right, you are now back in the nucleus of the family, whatever that family makeup is, single parent, married, whatever.
What age would you say that, I mean, that changes, where that shift from parents being the most important to friends being the most important actually happens?
I think it actually does sort of happen in line with secondary school. So I know here that's around 11. I think in other countries where their schooling separates at slightly different ages, it can happen there, certainly in the UK. But I think actually mentally it's around 11, sort of a 10 to 12, I would say. And it's that they go through a kind of an interesting stage where they really, really need you, but they also really don't want you. So you'll get the kind of, can you tie my shoelaces? But I'm going to the shop alone. And parents find it, I used to work with so many parents at this age, almost at 10 would be the key age that I'd be called in, because they'd be saying that the child's really clingy here, but wants this independence here. And how do we transition? How do we transition this point?
Yeah.
At different ages. So, you know, I've had children that haven't really started to separate till kind of 13, 14, some who've started to separate at 9. So it depends on you as a family as well, and how much you encourage that.
So from the perspective of raising a teenager, and you understand the balance where they need to have freedom, but also they need to have that support and feel like you're always there. How do you kind of find that balance? And how do you find that balance in a lockdown?
And I think in the lockdown is the key. So I think it was probably 2 weeks into lockdown before it occurred to me, and this is a really silly thing, that my children could still leave the house without me. You know, it really felt like we were under lockdown and we're into quarantine. We're not allowed to leave the house. I know in places like Dubai and other places it's different. You have to kind of literally apply for permission to leave. But certainly in the UK, where that wasn't the case, it literally 2 weeks before I went, they could still go to the park without me as long as we have social distance. So, you know, actually, while I'm speaking to you, I was just saying to you, I've sent them out, out of the house. And it's been quite nice, actually, that they have bonded back together, because they weren't so bonded before that. So I think the really key thing I would say to parents is you still have to have your boundaries. They still have to be respectful. They still have to do the jobs that you've asked them to do. But it's how do you create space from each other, as much for you as a parent, how do you create space from each other within the same house? And it is giving each other that respect of, I'm going to sit in my room and do whatever for 3 or 4 hours, or I'm going to go and, you go into this part of the house, or I'll go here, or we'll put headphones on, whatever your space is. How do you create space? Because just because we're all together doesn't mean we need to be all together. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I get, finding those boundaries, creating opportunities to have space, and I mean, I guess a lot of that stems down to routine, right? One of the things you said earlier was having a routine. Yeah. I think that's.
So I would say what I think is good is what I would call a flexible routine. So in the day, you need to have achieved these things. Because also, depending on what age your teenager is, their sleep pattern changes at around age 13. So teenagers around age 13, and this is, you might have seen this before in the news, their sleep pattern tends to go more in 11 till 11. So they don't tend to fall asleep until 11. They want to get up later, which is why we have this kind of sort of myth of teenagers, you can't get them out of bed in the morning. Because actually for them, their body clock is hours earlier. It's
right.
telling them it's hours earlier. So it's the equivalent of me waking up at 4 a.m. and going, time for school. So I have to say, I've seen this as a really nice time that I can give my teens to sleep in the morning. But it doesn't mean that when they don't get up, they still have to get dressed, do their teeth, have breakfast, and do, my son has schoolwork he has to do. And yes, part of that routine is you have to go outside once a day. So it's giving them a structure, but also allowing them to have autonomy. Because if you think about it, they're used to going to school, kind of doing what they like within as much as they can, you know, break time, lunchtime, etc. And all of that has gone. Effectively, autonomy-wise, they've almost got the autonomy of a toddler now. You know, this is when you're going to eat, sleep, except the parent is always there. And can you imagine just somebody being always there?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to recognize they still need to have autonomy and they still need to have choice. So I think of it like a boundary. So I used to work in schools with parents and run parenting classes. And I used to say to them, I don't know if you can see, let me just stand up. I used to say to them, it's like this, it's like a no boundary. And in this circle here where you're doing your parenting, they can fall out of trees, they will try drink, they will try drugs, they will do all sorts of stupid things. You have this boundary, and I call this the no boundary. So if you're 11 and you ask me if you can go out till 3 a.m., that's a no. I don't even have to think about it. So it's how do you keep this nice boundary? Because teenagers will push like that. When you see rebellious behavior, they're just pushing. What they're saying is, do you love me enough to stop me? Because I'm pushing. And if as a parent we bend or we do gaps, that's when you get problems. Okay, so if the teenager pushes and you just keep moving away, they're just going to keep pushing. The behavior will get worse. If they push here and it's strict and then they kind of go through a hole here, then they lose it. So think of this like a mental safety boundary. And we have these in every relationship. So we have it in our sibling relationships, in our partner relationships, in our work relationships. It's kind of saying, I know where I stand, and in here I can be flexible, but I know this is the boundary that I have. And teens really need that. So they will push against it massively. That's what they're designed to do. They're testing. They're testing you. How much do you love me? They're also testing society. How much can I push in society? And the aim of it is, if you've done your job well enough, they become adults who go, I kind of know where the boundaries are, and I kind of know where I can push the boundaries. So now we kind of put them into a time in their life, and they're meant to be pushing boundaries and being a bit rebellious and going out into the world. We kind of go, oh, no, you're at home with me. So how do you keep them independence from lockdown? That's what I do.
That's the question. I mean, so Valerie's here saying so true. I think, I mean, how do you, so the questions then change, right? How do you kind of set boundaries and create boundaries under lockdown when everything's kind of changed? And when it comes to routine, a lot of the parents I've spoken to, they kind of either go one way or the other way. One way is they're either really relaxed, they're almost anti-homeschooling, they're using this as an opportunity for the children to do whatever they want throughout the day because they've never had that opportunity before, just to be creative and enjoy themselves. And I think there's a lot of benefit from that. On the flip side, there's a lot of other parents who say, no, you should keep the routine the same as school, wake up at 8 o'clock, you know, you eat at the same time, you have your break at the same time, we try and give you that routine and structure because it helps you with your mental health. And so, you know, it doesn't have to be one or the other, I don't think. I think you can have that at time, right?
Exactly. So absolutely. So what I will sit here and admit to is that I've been both of those parents over the last few weeks. When we first went into lockdown, I went into, we're going to get at the same time, we're going to do everything the same, we're going to have this routine, we'll meet downstairs at the kitchen table at 10:15 because that's break time, we'll have lunch together, then we'll go. I just had this this is how it's going to work. And not only did they not want to do it, I didn't want to do it. And so it didn't happen. And so we kind of had a strain of me trying to enforce that for the first week or so, and then realizing I wasn't going to get out of bed if I didn't want to, and neither were they. And then they would say, but you're not doing whatever it was. So then I kind of pulled back and went, okay, hang on, this isn't working. And then I went into complete relaxed, fine, I'm just going to leave you to do your work. I'm going to do my thing. I'm in pajamas, and I just went into that. And literally it took me kind of 2 weeks to go, okay, that's not working either. Okay. So it's finding what I would call a flexible boundary. So actually it's different for both of them. So my daughter doesn't have much work to do anymore. So she's basically, self-motivated. She gets up, she does her piece of work, she motivates herself, she's dressed, teeth, etc. Brilliant. My son, by the time I get up in the morning, which is not really late, is already playing computer games, which I then have to boot him off. He's in pajama bottoms. That I've given in on that one. That's no longer, it's no longer an argument that we're having. And I get him onto his schoolwork, and then he does it, and he flexes his lunch, and then he goes back and does more work. And I think it's really important that part of the autonomy is to say what's working for you. So in the end, at the end of the 2 weeks, I sat down with him around the table and said, okay, this is what I think will work and why. So all of my reasons why, one of which being I speak to clients. So if you want to come in and eat lunch and I'm sitting in the kitchen, you can't do that. Okay, so us having a kind of an idea of when and why, but why, it was so important to explain the why behind everything rather than this is what we're doing. And then I said, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what do you want? So some of it I gave in and said, my son said, I don't see why I have to get out of pajama bottoms in the morning unless I'm leaving the house. I thought, okay, this is not important. I won't fight that battle. But some of the others around, I need you to have breakfast, you know, when you get up in the morning, so that actually the kitchen is free for me to work in. That was important. And actually it was important to have a different set of rules for each child because they're having a different experience. Okay, so I know that's harder if you've got lots of kids or you've got lots of different ages. But I would say it's going back to that point of giving them autonomy where you can and giving them choice where you can. What can you give them choice on? Okay, you can give them choice on some times, maybe what they wear, maybe structuring their day. So how can you do it? And I think I would say the parents that are saying don't do any schoolwork, enjoy other things, I sit on that side of the fence too. I think actually, you know, I've talked to my children, this is about a time of learning resilience. I said to them, when they grow up, the resilience that they will have, can you imagine being at work when you're older and somebody throwing you a small problem and you just going, I've been through the pandemic, this is not an issue. So it's really important to talk to them about what they're gaining that's not just schoolwork, because there's a lot of negativity about lockdown.
Yeah.
And they are gaining so many skills that no other generation of, you know, that they will know will have. Think of this generation, it's going through an experience that is, it's unique. You know, it's being able to be
as this is from a society global point of view, if you look at it from very, very, very micro, the experience that a healthy family goes through, which is the majority of people on the planet, right, who are going through this whole situation, you know, they'll probably look back with actually quite fond memories for a lot of them. They've shared that time with each other, which they'll never ever get back again, right? When will you ever be able to say, oh, you know, you spent 6 months with your teenage children? They couldn't escape to go to their friends or anything. It was just spending that time with family, right? But I totally, you know, it's, you know, when you said that first week when the lockdown hit, it was like, right, bang, bang, bang. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's the routine. And I think that's kind of what a lot of families did to try and get control over the situation a little bit. Yeah. It's a bit like we have no idea what's going on. There's no control. Everything's all the cards are all over the place. We don't know what's going on, and so let's try and create control in our lives. And then it's almost like people have got into this. Well, this is the way things are going to be for a while. This is the new way of life for now. And yeah, we got so Matt Hillier, he's our area manager in the UK. He's just commented saying, we have a schedule with lots of free time in the afternoon. They have set things, they have to do exercise, schoolwork, a job around the house, and then it's free time. That's when they're not doing 5 live classes per day with instructor Matt as well.
And I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant.
Lauren says, I have a relaxed schedule. It is to get out to do a chore, eat breakfast, then do daily habits. Daily habits, it's a routine we do where we guide students through the 3 Ps, confidence, conduct, concentration, and they practice gratitude while doing that. Then classes, then in the evening, some more school, and later have free time in bed. And Matt's also written, we enforce family time. Normally faced with reluctance, but ultimately end up enjoying it. Well, that is.
And I think that's the way, isn't it? Everybody, I mean, it was interesting how you talked about, you know, we all went for control, but actually all the adults went for control. Let's be honest. As adults, we went, oh my God, I need to control. I need control. And we then tried to enforce that on our children. And actually our children kind of went, no, the ones that could. And I think it's worth looking at your needs as an adult, your needs as a parent. What did you do So I am somebody, I personally like structure. I also like no structure, which was why we kind of came to this easy balance. But it was my stuff, my emotional baggage in that first week that was kicking me into control. It may not have been the best thing for the children at all. And I think also something a lot of people have forgotten to do, and this sounds crazy, but is a lot of people have forgotten to sit down and talk to their children about what's actually going on. So the children have got the message, there's a virus, you know, people are dying, we need to stay at home for this. But for some children, that's all they've heard. So actually sitting down and having a conversation about how serious it is, what's the likelihood of it affecting them, you know, what is actually going on, we will be okay in the end. Children are masters of imagining the worst case scenario on anything. So it's our own reluctance to speak about the things that we're scared of and we're frightened of and the things that are confusing us. It's our reluctance to do that, which hinders our children. Right?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it took me, again, it probably took me a week or so, a couple of weeks to have that conversation with my children. Do you understand what's going on? Do you have enough information? You know, do you have any fears? You know, my son said to me, are we likely to know somebody that dies? And I said, well, I would think, yes, we probably will. So far, that's not been the case, but yeah, we will. But we will be okay. And again, it's back to that message of resilience. We will be okay.
And I guess, you know, especially when we're thinking about teenagers, you know, there's this element where they're doing most of their socializing online when they're not with us, right? And especially now more than ever before. When you're online, even as an adult, you can, you know, whenever you're online, there's you know, the news popping up, media popping up, people sharing this and that, and there's that just overwhelming negativity. Unless you're old enough and mature enough to understand why that goes on, then, you know, it's and how to kind of, you know, just, you know, take yourself away from it and look at it with a third perspective instead of being absorbed into it. That can become your train of thought, and suddenly, you know, you feel that is what's going on. So I guess having those really transparent conversations, you know, not only improves your communication with your teenager, but also, you know, eases the mindset, eases what they're going through, and brings some reality, some, you know, brings it back down to earth a little bit.
I completely agree. My 16-year-old is an avid news watcher. We'll often kind of walk into the kitchen and say, did you know something that I didn't know? Because I'm not avidly watching the news. My 14-year-old doesn't really watch it at all. So it's catering to does everybody understand what's going on? And there's a really lovely trick with teenagers. If you want to have conversations that you think they're going to squirm away from, you do it side by side. So you rarely, unless you can do it around the dinner table, depending on your family. But if you walk side by side, when you want to have the puberty conversations and all of those ones that make everybody squirm, side by side on a walk. And because they don't have to make direct eye contact with you, they will ask you much more, and you will hear much more of what's going on in their head.
Yeah.
So your daily walks, where you're splitting off into pairs or whatever, if there's a kid you want to target, you know, you just find yourself going off and then just do I've been thinking about, and you can use your own experience. So, you know, I said to mine, you know, I'm finding it really hard to decide whether we should have this really strict routine or not have a routine. And these are my reasons why. And you'll find if you are vulnerable with your children, that is one of the biggest strengths that you can give them. Because by showing that you have a vulnerability and that you have things that you're not getting right, what they learn is it's okay to not get things right, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to share that vulnerability. I'm still loved.
Totally. So, I think that's a really important lesson to pass on.
Pardon?
I think it's a really important lesson to pass on, isn't it? I mean, otherwise, I think there's that element of growing up thinking your parents were perfect and everything they did, and you therefore should be in that same position, right? So when you make mistakes, maybe you're harder on yourself, or definitely.
I used to run parenting classes. I ran them for 3.5 years, and it was 3 hours a night for 8 weeks, for once a week for 8 weeks. So it was a really big time commitment for a lot of professional parents and it was on a Friday quite often. Just wanted to go home. And I cannot even begin to tell you the amount of parents that would cry, be moved to tears when they reflected back about how they felt they couldn't say they didn't feel clever because the parents called them the clever kid, or they didn't feel they could say that they wouldn't get it, or they didn't feel they could disagree with their parents or show a vulnerability because they never heard their parents argue. Their parents were never wrong. Their parents never said sorry. So saying sorry to your child is one of the biggest gifts that you can give them. Anything that you can give them that says, you know, I'm an adult, I'm muddling my way through. So I say to my kids, you know, I was a parent at 17. I was a really young mum. And I say to them, you know, there was no manual. You didn't come with a book. I'm doing my best. I read what I can. I talk to other people and I do the best I can at any moment. And we both might look back and say that that's wrong. And I can tell you, having a 30-year-old, I can look back and say that I've done lots wrong. You know, that's life. But I also did lots right. And there's a lovely piece of research, actually, which I'll share with you. And the longitudinal research of parenting showed that if you have to get it right 40% of the time. And that's good eye contact. I'm listening to you. I'm taking in what you're saying. It's 40%. For the 30% above that, you do what's called repair. So that's when you ignore them or you push them away, like the lovely newsreader who must be laughing at us now. Do you remember when his child came in and he put his hand?
I love that video.
And it's when you just, you know, or you shout at them or you just lose your temper or whatever. But it's the repair. Okay. So I remember losing a lot with my daughter on the way to school once. There was lots of stress going on and I just lost it with her. And on the way home, I said to her, I'm really sorry. It was not okay for me to shout at you. I absolutely apologize. You know, I shouldn't have done that. And she said to me, I knew you were going to have to apologize. Me, so she knew I would. The final 30%, you can just get wrong.
Okay. That's reassuring, isn't it?
Wrong.
that's pretty reassuring.
So don't aim for 30%, but you can get 30% wrong.
Right.
Right?
We don't expect 100%, right?
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, at the moment, we're all under lockdown. We've all never done this before. We're all going to get some of it wrong. So cut yourself some slack as much as cutting them. When you shout at them, reflect on why, reflect on what's going on for you, apologize, you know, mend it, repair it. When they or they're stroppy or they're moody, again, what is going on for them? And be good in your communication. You know, actually speak to them clearly. You know, I know it's really frustrating. I'm really sorry. This is really hard on you. You know, my son said to me, when's the minimum we're going back to school? And I said, well, they say September, but I don't guarantee that, you know, and I know that's really hard on you. So try not to always feel you have to be a parent. I have to say, teenage for me is my absolute favorite time of kids. I'm not a massive fan of little tiny ones. And I love teenage because you start to see the people that they are. You start to see who they're growing into. You start to see that they don't have all of your thoughts and beliefs and behaviours. And while that can be really challenging, it's quite inspiring to say, you know, almost I've kind of put the best bits of me, hopefully, in here and look at this person that is developing. And the conversations that you can have with them can be stunning, really. Yeah. So it is a lovely chance to, in some respects, have more of those conversations because they can't go out, they can't leave you. But have those conversations in the right way. Try to engage them almost as an adult rather than a child.
One of the things I've been thinking, you know, alongside this is, you know, we spoke about how this isn't a sentence. Doesn't need to be a sentence. You know, yes, you've lost exams and all these different things, but ultimately there is opportunity within this for you as a teenager, as a parent. And I think, you know, if when I look at a lot of the teenagers we work with, that age group from 10 to 13, it's where most of the bullying happens. And that happens because there's a breakdown of communication. But if someone said to these parents who are dealing with bullying and their children have been through it, you know, chronic bullying, if we could keep you in your house for 4 or 5 months and, you know, you're not allowed to leave the house and it's just building your communication together for 4 or 5 months. And at the end of it, you've got this amazing relationship, better communication. Do you feel the bullying wouldn't have happened or it would be less severe? And the answer would be yes. Do you know what I mean? If you can just develop that communication and kind of utilize this time to improve it, you know, I think that's a really, really good insight. The other thing, like you said, parents putting pressure on themselves, I really see that as well. I see a lot of parents trying to be like super parents, you know, like this is, and I think Vicky's a bit like that. She's going to run in a minute and tell me off, but she's, you know, I think she's very, very keen, you know, to really try and keep our daughter super engaged and doing loads of activities. And a part of me is a bit like, well, I think it's quite good for her to be bored now and again, you know, to just you know, when I grew up, and I imagine this is a bit like a summer holiday for me when I was a kid, right? In the countryside, I wasn't allowed the TV too much. There wasn't that much to do. You know, I just had myself to kind of, you know, use my imagination to come up with things to do, right? And I think from the age of toddler and above, it becomes something they can do. And I've watched my daughter, you know, find things to do and create her own games and build her imagination. And I imagine that's the same for every age group. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was something like by the age of 10, we drummed 99% of creativity out of our children by sending them through the school processes that we do.
Wow.
I mean, it was horrendous. It was horrendous. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. The brain, when bored, will create. But we don't allow our kids to get bored anymore. We actually often don't allow ourselves to get bored anymore. One of the work I do with CEOs and entrepreneurs is, what are you doing that is not work? So actually, I've had people go into meetings where they've been working on, say, web design, and I say, what did you do before the meeting? And they said, actually, I was weeding in my garden and I was playing a bit of piano. How did the meeting go? It went amazingly. Yeah, because you've turned on the creative bit of your brain.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You know, they even talk about like getting CEOs to wash up while you kind of have a problem in your head, because your brain is so bored, it will find a solution.
Really brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it literally is kind of, if you don't switch off, you won't create. And
it's
so
like a meditative practice, you know, you're doing something so simple that your brain's got time to switch off and create and think.
It has to do it. And so my son, I could happily leave him on the computer all day. I would probably crowbar him off at about 6 o'clock. Today I had a joke because he walked into the kitchen and I said, oh my God, you know, Jack's come downstairs. And he kind of looked around and went, I'm hungry. That was the only reason he'd come downstairs. But actually, if I go upstairs and say, you get off your computer now, he'll come down and he'll draw. He's a beautiful artist and he draws beautiful drawings. You know, if I then say, okay, you've now been sitting for too long, you need to go outside. You know, I'll go outside and he'll have created something in the garden, an assault course, or he'll have done something else.
Yeah.
And he won't stay bored. People don't stay bored. Often you see somebody sitting still going, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. They don't. They go and amuse themselves. So again, what they're learning when we talk about schooling, they are learning the skill of how do I keep myself amused, but more importantly, how do I self-soothe? So one of the problems that you see in adults is they can't self-soothe. So they drink, they smoke, you know, they do other things. But to soothe themselves, they can't soothe. Part of being able to soothe myself is me saying, I'm bored and it's making me feel uncomfortable, or I'm tired, or I'm worried. What am I going to do to soothe myself? And for children, that can be reading a book, it can be drawing, it can be painting, it can be just playing in their own mind. But we keep them so busy, we never give them this skill. So it's a bit the same with adults. I'm speaking to a lot of adults who don't know how to self-soothe, and they're under lockdown, especially those who are on their own. How do I self-soothe? I can't see my friend, I can't go out, I can't do anything. And they're having to learn to be okay with themselves. And being okay with yourself and accepting who you are and loving yourself, that is the biggest thing that you give teenagers. And kind of coming back to your point about the bullying, I work with an awful lot of adults who've been bullied as children, an awful lot of adults. And we do a technique where we take them back to a memory which has been particularly traumatic, and we rework the memory for them to release that emotion. And always, it's never the physical that has been the problem. It's their sense of worth that has been affected. It's their self-esteem and their sense of worth and their sense of self-love and value that they stop seeing themselves as worthy people. And so if you can instill in them in this lockdown, aren't you just an amazing person? So I've been priming, we call it priming. I've been priming my teenagers, aren't you amazing? Look at all the things that you're going to learn under lockdown. You're going to learn to be okay with yourself. You're going to learn to really enjoy your own company. You're going to learn to see all of the brilliant things about you as a person. All of the things that you have done. You know, I set my son he was helping me with something DIY, I can't remember what it was. And he just came up with this amazing solution. I was just like, wow, that's amazing. So you as a parent can really be priming. I mean, do it all the time, but really be priming under lockdown. What are you learning? What are you learning now about yourself? How are you soothing yourself? My daughter the other day was, you know, really upset. And I talked to her and I cuddled her. And then I said, and what are you going to do that's going to make you feel better? Do you want to have a bath? Do you want to read a book? Do you want to, you know, how do you soothe yourself? Because if you can bring your child up to soothe themselves and love themselves, job done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Wow. We've got a comment here. Absolutely love this. Taught me so much. Yeah, a brilliant. You know, so many brilliant insights. One of the things you've spoken to me briefly about before is neuroscience. Could you go into that a little bit here, if we have time?
Yeah, there's a really key thing it's well worth knowing, is that ages 8, 10, and 14, the brain rewires. There's an absolutely brilliant book called, I think it's called Brainstorm by Daniel, it's Siegel, Siegel. I hope that's okay for me to mention that.
Yeah,
talks much more in depth. He's a neuroscientist, so he's brilliant to go to. But at 8, 10, and 14, children's brains rewire. So if you imagine all of our kind of neural networks, all the pathways that we go down that tell us how to behave or how to think. So if I see a spider, I'm going to have this fear reaction because that's the kind of pathway my brain has done. It's like the brain kind of looks at every road, every map, every pathway it's ever made and just says, do I need it anymore? So let's say you grew up afraid of dogs, but you got a dog and then lost that fear of dogs. It would look at your old fear of dogs pathway and go, I don't need that anymore. And it literally sort of melts it back into the brain. This is a kind of a model, but it melts it back into the brain. And the effect of that is you get your teenagers behaving like toddlers. And we all know this, you know, the sulky teenager. It's not that they're feeling sulky, it's they don't actually have the same brain capacity anymore. And they grow the new neural pathways. So when I worked with teenagers and parents, I used to say to the parents, if there's a behavior that your child has that's really poor, try to knock it on the head before they're 14, because then you'll get the new pathway that they use a lot more. And at some point in that culling process, the old pathway will just disappear. After 14, we still have the new pathway, but we have to choose it. So it's a bit like it was after 14 that I learned comfort eating wasn't the best thing. So I'd quite like to go and have some comfort food, but I now have my new pathway that says, but actually, if I want to be healthy, I need to go and do something different. And this is so useful because can you imagine you're looking at your 14-year-old who is 6'3", who's got a full beard, you know, covered in hair, looks like a man, and you're thinking you're behaving like a 4-year-old. Well, yeah. Because in their brain at that moment, that's the kind of capacity they've got. So you see this very, very beautiful adult behavior, and then you can see this toddler behavior. And so as a parent, recognizing they have no control over that, that's just going on in their brain, it allows you to manage those areas of conflict much better.
Wow.
So it's really worth knowing.
Yeah, really useful. Amazing. Comment here, this is great. Thanks, guys. We've got some good questions, actually, Maria, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
How do we ask them to vocalize their mixed feelings, their mixed up feelings?
So what I would say is vocalize yours first. So whenever I want to have a conversation with my children about something, I will always say, you know, today I found this really frustrating. I will try to pick whatever I think is going on for them. And I will try to find even an example of when I was younger and the same thing happened to me. Or I will just voice it as an adult. And to be honest, sometimes I'll just make something up. If I think it's a key question or a key conversation that needs to be had, I might use something in a newspaper, if newspaper's on the table, you know, whatever it is. So you could sit there and say, you know what, today I just felt I felt bored and I felt frustrated, and part of me felt really happy about lockdown and part of me felt really unhappy. And I just have all of these really mixed feelings about whatever it is. And I just felt really frustrated. I don't know if you ever feel like that.
Yeah, right. So I guess it's, you know, getting to that position where it doesn't feel like you're being direct with them, but it feels like they can relate to you. So you're taking down that initial kind of barrier. It's a way more accessible conversation because they don't feel judged when they go into it. Instead, they feel like you're going through this, so maybe they'll share, more likely to share, right?
Yeah. Or the other way to do it sometimes is if you think they won't talk to you, is ask them their advice. So sometimes when I was working, my kids knew I worked with teenagers. I'd say to them, do you know, I've got this kid I'm working with, and this is his problem, or this is her problem. And I just, you know, what would you say? What would you say to that? And they'd go, oh, well, I'd say, blah, blah, blah. Off they go. So less directness. Not to say, I mean, if you have that relationship, you might have it. I have I say to her, you know, what's going on for you today? You're so grumpy. Sometimes I just get shouted at. Sometimes I get, you know, yeah, I don't know why I feel so grumpy today. And help them work out what it is. You know, is it hormones? Are you tired? Have you eaten? You know, has a friend said something to you? Do we need to talk that through? So it obviously depends on your relationship. But if you're starting to build that communication, you've got to show them that you're vulnerable first, because they're not going to say anything to the perfect parent.
Yeah, this is brilliant. I feel like I should be taking loads of notes down. You know, this is like all the ninja tricks that parents need. all in a 45-minute, 1 hour interview.
It was
brilliant.
a really hard way, because I did have to have 5 of them.
Well, you know, you've done the hard work, and now I can just take down the tips. That's great. So we've got another question here. I think it's Amanda as well from Dubai. My son is 5 years old. He had a meltdown the other day, saying he hates coronavirus. How can you kind of approach that as a parent? And
if that had been me, that would have just been a kind of, big cuddle. You know, I hate it too. I hate it too. You know, we don't have to always put a positive spin on, and in fact, it's really negative of us if we do.
Right.
You know, if I tell you I'm upset about something and you tell me not to be upset and you start reframing it, I'm just going to get frustrated with you. Like, sometimes you just need to validate their feelings. So it's being a parent so hard. It's that balance, isn't it, between right now I need to drop in the priming of everything's great and put a positive spin on. Right now I just need to set you in your pain.
Yeah.
Okay? So I say for parents,
almost avoiding that feeling if you're constantly just putting a positive on it. You're not letting them experience it, which is all part of the developmental process, right?
And also what you're then also doing is stopping them empathize with people who this has not been an okay experience from. You know, lots of people are separated from their families, lots of key workers are separated. Lots of people in other countries in this country have had people die that have been close to them. If they can't go back to school, go back into life and empathize, you know, they have to be empathetic. So it is really, you know, saying to my son, yes, next year we might know somebody who's died. And yes, that could be your grandparent. It could be, you know, whatever. It could be me. You know, my son said to me, could it be you? And I said, well, it's unlikely, but yes, it could. But you have all of these people around you who would look after you if that happened. You would be okay. So what I would say is your key message always has to be, you will be okay. Even if the most awful thing happens, you will be okay. Because what I see in the adults I work with is they don't have a belief of I will be okay. They stay in relationships too long because they're not going to be okay without that person. They stay in jobs too long because they won't be okay without that job. Okay, so knowing that whatever happens to me, however awful it is, I will be okay. I am a good person and I will be okay is so key. So when your 5-year-old, whoever it is having a meltdown about something, to just say, yeah, that would be rubbish. And it is rubbish. And this feeling is rubbish. But have that validation, but then do that. What can we do to help cheer you up? So again, you're giving them back autonomy and you're giving them back choice, and you're teaching them to self-soothe at the same time. We is a really key phrase.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like, you know, that's a mistake I must often make then, because I think it's been drilled into me to be overly positive, even when, you know, especially when I'm looking after other people. You know, you almost feel like it's a responsibility to guide things in a very positive way. But that's brilliant advice. You know, what an amazing bit of advice that was to let them experience it.
You're quite similar to me. I think that you're a solution finder. What I've seen of you is that you just find a solution. Here's a problem. What's the solution? And the problem with solution finder parents, and I am one, is we solution find for everybody else. And that's a skill that we need to learn. So one of the hardest things for me as a parent is to sit there on my hands going, I think I know what I would do. But doing that, what would you do? What would you like to do? And how can you do it? And you can do them you can do that with your child if they're 3. What is it that you think would cheer you up right now? All the way up to 25, you know, what is it that you do? And it's how do you keep out of the way? You know, my 30-year-old sometimes, you know, I'll give her advice and she'll go, Mum, I'm 30, you know, let me sort this out on my own, you know. So always remember to step back and let them solution find first. Then if you've got, would this be useful to you to think about this?
It's we've got another comment here saying I keep putting a positive spin in, and it's definitely kind of frustrating on the receiving end. Yeah, that's one of the things. If I'm in a bad mood and someone's constantly, telling me to be positive, it's the last thing I want to hear. Just let me be in a bad mood. Yeah, but it's what really stuck out with me and what you just said was by forcing positivity into a situation, you're not giving the other person the ability to empathize with someone who's going through something similar in a very, very difficult way, right? So that's a really powerful thought. I hadn't considered that. That's really, really interesting.
If you think about it, I was on the radio the other week and the presenter said to me, thousands, millions of people are displaced around the world. They're displaced around the world. They've lost their families, their livelihoods. There will be suicides over this. There will be mental health issues over this. This is not a little thing. And we can't bring up a generation to go, oh, well, I sat in my house and it was really fun. And, we played board games with the family and we really bonded and it was great. We need to recognize that for other people, it's not great. Yeah. It's really not great. And if our children can't grow up to empathize with other people's struggles, how do we manage it? So for my kids, when they come home from school and said, there's this annoying person or boy or girl and they do this, they do that, one of the first questions I ask them is, do you know what their home life is like? Yeah. And odds are they will know. And they'll say, oh yeah, I think it's not great. There used to be a child that would crawl around through classrooms with my daughter. It annoyed her. And I said, what do you think is going on for a child that is crawling on the floor in secondary school? And it allows them to be empathetic. It's not to take away the frustration. It's not to say you shouldn't act or change things, but to empathize. And that's why being vulnerable allows them to empathize with you as a human being, not just a parent.
Powerful stuff. That development of emotional intelligence just becomes so key when they become teenagers, right? I mean, if you can develop that from a younger age, you have the conversations are so different by the time they become teenagers. It's one of the things we work on quite a lot by developing leadership skills and communication skills and all these different things within our class. Definitely. Very, very interesting.
I wanted to pick up on the leadership thing. Is one of the things that I saw with a lot of parents, and I do see it under lockdown, sort of some of the comments that people are making around their children, is we changed from when I was at school, if you were quiet, you could kind of get away with not having to go up to the front of the class and not having to do a presentation. In the kind of bubbly kids, what's the word? They self-pick themselves to, I'll come up to the front. But now we expect every child to do that. So we have pushed leadership skills. We've pushed, you need to be able to present. You need to be able to state your point and debate. We've pushed all this. And then when our kids push back at us as parents, we tell them they can't. And you just can't have it both ways. You can't say, I want you to go to school or go out into the world or, go into your community and I want you to lead and I want you to set an example and I want you to have your own ideas and your own opinions and be this strong, resilient person. But I'm going to tell you exactly what to do at home. And if you don't agree with me, I expect you to be quiet and just do as you're told.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I have with my kids is, here are the boundaries. Here's what I've set. If you ever wish to negotiate with me, absolutely fine. But you negotiate with me like an adult. You come with your pros and cons. If you ever disagree with a rule or something I've set, you can come and negotiate with me. But you have to negotiate. You scream and you shout and you cry at me. You can go and do that stuff. That's fine. We all get frustrated. But you come back to me with a coherent argument. And there's lots of times at all different ages when my kids have come back. My son argued for more computer time with a full A4 pros and cons list. And one of the pros was, I will not be unhappy if I have more time. And he got half an hour more because his list was good.
But I mean, that's teaching really good skills in negotiation, right? I mean, as you grow up through life, negotiation and everything, it's like, and you have so many negotiations throughout the day without even realizing, right? Even your personal relationships and everything you do, so that's such a key skill.
So think of lockdown. Think of your 5-year-old in lockdown, or your 10-year-old, or your 15-year-old, and they ask you for something that you don't agree with. Ask them to negotiate. Teach them to negotiate with you. So I kind of, when people are saying, we're homeschooling, you're not homeschooling for a start. You're doing the work that has been set by your children's teachers. Most of you are not homeschooling. Okay, so let's not try and put that pressure on ourselves. But what else can you teach them? What else can you teach them? Yeah. What can you teach them to love themselves? Can you teach them to be resilient? Can you teach them to have empathy for others? Can you teach them to negotiate? Can you teach them to be autonomous? Can you teach them to see what's working and what doesn't?
There's almost like a less of a focus on academic development and more of a focus on the softer skills. And I think a lot of people actually wanted that for their children. There was almost, I feel like there's this kind of feeling of people wanted the educational system to be disrupted in that way. So there was more of a focus on softer skills, emotional intelligence, and that sort of stuff.
That's the same in the corporate world as well. Actually, there's been a big push in the corporate world for soft skills, as they call them, communication, negotiation, respect, all of that. There's been a real push for that, but people haven't been listening because that doesn't make money. Now suddenly everybody's remote working, and I can tell you the key things that I'm working with clients on are: how do you communicate with your team? How do you support your team? How do you understand your team? How do you understand that your team, that one doesn't want to get up at 8 in the morning for an all work meeting, and that one does? And how do you do that? And I would say every skill that people are using with their teams is the skill that you use with your child.
Right.
It's the same skill. It's the same piece of information.
Well, after 6 months of lockdown, we may have parents who are amazing negotiators now,
Well, and kids. And kids.
One of the things I'd like to talk about now is risk taking, because I know that's something that you know quite a bit about, and it's a big part for us. We always say in the Warrior Academy that courage earns confidence. Step 3 of our methodology, community inspire, challenge, lead. Step 3 is to challenge. So for me, risk taking and understanding risk and being able to process it is just a vital part of being human in order to grow properly. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on risk taking and just brief, because I know we're running out of time, but just a few insights would be amazing there.
So if you think about risk taking, what they're doing is being curious. So again, it kind of goes back to the leadership model. If you're pushing them to be leaders, you're pushing them to debate, they have to be curious within their own brain. Now you can't say, be curious here, don't be curious here. They're going to take risks. And I remember my oldest set of children, when they were teens, we went to a lovely talk at their school with a police officer who came to talk about drugs. And he said, any bright, intelligent child will probably try drugs, but statistically, they will do it once or twice and then not again. Because what they're doing is they're just being curious. And he said, they know the risks, they know the dangers, they'll try it once, try it twice, and then they're done. That's it. They just wanted to try it. They're just curious. And so when we're talking about risk takers, again, research shows that risk takers, they have a higher level of self-esteem, and they're socially more competent. And it's kind of back to that barrier. They're just checking. They're just risk taking and checking. And it's built into us. It's built into our brains on an evolutionary basis to risk take. The problem is that the risk taking kind of back in the caveman days, as it were, am I going to fall out of that tree and will that lion eat me? They were a lot more simplistic and quick to learn. We've now got alcohol and drugs and online social media and stuff. So it's harder. So I think as parents, it's really important to allow a bit of that risk taking to a safe zone, but allow them to kind of get stuff wrong, allow them to kind of fall over and break their arms sometimes, because that's how we learn. And you're absolutely right with that. Again, research proves the stronger that you feel in your body physically, boys and girls, the much less likely are you to be attacked. So there's a really interesting statistic, I don't know if you know it, that they actually looked at they showed rapists in prison a picture of a street view and said, who would you attack? They all picked the woman who had her head down, shoulders bent over. And they said, well, she just looks like she wouldn't fight back. And there is a direct correlation between how women feel strength in their body, how physically strong they feel, and how much confidence they have. So for me, when I read that, my youngest daughter was 2, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I had her straight up the commando nets, up at 2, going over the top. And she now boxes, and she's very physically fit. Never been bullied.
It's psychosomatic, isn't it? It's bringing that strength from the body to the way, body language, to non-verbal communication, to the way you walk into the room, the way you hold your posture, the way you hold eye contact, all these different things. They shout out that you're not a victim.
They do, and I think that's why what you're doing is just so important, because you've just got all of those kids out there going, not only that, but I know my body. I'm so in tune with my body. I know it, and I know how it works, and I know how it works for me. Like you said, it resonates off you in a kind of energy drive that just tells people, don't bother with this person.
Yeah, definitely.
It's great.
I feel like we need to invite you back on to talk about bullying. That'll be a 2-hour interview. We've got a quick question here, which is, which book would you recommend for parenting younger kids?
There's a fabulous writer, I think he's called Stephen Green, and he did a book called Toddler Taming. I don't remember what his next one is, but if you Google Stephen Green and Toddler Taming, it should show you his other titles. And I thought his books were brilliant as a little. He's down to earth, he tells it like it is, but he doesn't give the pretentious, this is the perfect model. He kind of says, if you need to give your kid a dummy to shut them up, do it, but ultimately you'll pay the price when you have to try to get rid of it. And I just love that about him. And just another note is for teenagers, there's a fantastic book out there, and it's called Get Out of My Life, but Please Take Me and Alex into Town First. And again, I came across that book, I think, third child in, and it's brilliant because you can cross-reference and just look up things like lying. You can just go to the bit about lying. You didn't have to go to read the whole book, but it was just this brilliant title: Get out of my life, but please take me and Alex into town first.
I love that. It's brilliant.
And Stephen Green for the younger ones, brilliant people.
Oh man, amazing. Listen, Marie, that was absolutely amazing. So many brilliant insights. I know that our warrior family in Dubai and the UK will really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much for coming on.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. It's been really enjoyable.
Right, I shall see you soon. Take care and see you guys in the next podcast.